Weekend hot takes beyond scandal, seeing the system behind the story. There's a story making headlines again. A powerful man, a teenage girl, and a media cycle eager to flatten everything into a tidy narrative about trafficking. But when you read past the outrage and into the details, something else becomes painfully clear. This isn't a story about sex work. This is a story about intersecting vulnerabilities, about a young person navigating homelessness, debt, instability, and the absence of any stable adult support. It's about how a system fails a girl long before a man in power ever enters the picture. This week's New York Times reporting lays out the circumstances surrounding the girl at the center of the Matt Gaetz scandal, a teenager whose life had already been shaped by instability, a homeless parent, and the kind of financial insecurity that makes you choose between braces and survival. These are not the ingredients of empowerment. They're the ingredients of desperation, and desperation is what predators, institutions, and power structures exploit. Let's be clear. Youth cannot consent to commercial sex. That is not sex work. That is exploitation. But exploitation doesn't fall from the sky. It is cultivated at the intersections of poverty, gender, age, race, housing precarity, and family instability. It grows in the cracks where the safety net should have been. The young person in this story was not recruited into sex work. She was navigating survival while powerful adults around her were navigating pleasure, politics, and impunity. That difference matters because when we conflate DMST with adult consensual sex work, we erase sex workers and we erase exploited youth by treating them as props in someone else's scandal. Where the system failed and why it matters. The story doesn't start at the party where she met powerful men. It starts at a mother facing homelessness, a teenager trying to figure out basic dental care, a lack of stable connection to school or trusted adults, a child welfare system that shows up only to punish, not provide, a political climate that funds policing but not prevention. These are the fundamental drivers of exploitation, not bad decisions, not teen promiscuity, and indeed, not sex work. They are predictable outcomes of a society that treats stability like a luxury item. The ethics investigation described evidence of sexual contact with a minor, payments for sex, and a pattern of behavior that exploited a young person who needed care, not a connection to political elites. Yet the narrative around the scandal still circles the adults, the careers at risk, the reputations to protect, instead of centering the young person whose vulnerability made her a target in the first place. This is the part we talk about in sex worker-led spaces all the time. Power doesn't have to break the law to break a life, and even when it does break the law, the consequences rarely reach upward. Sex worker-led organizations like SWAP Behind Bars understand the landscape of survival economies because we've lived in them, worked in them, and supported people moving through them for decades. We know the difference between an adult choosing sex work, an adult coerced into it, and a young person being exploited because every safety net around them has already collapsed. We refuse to collapse these experiences into one category because doing so has already caused devastating harm. She needed housing, food, medical care, a stable adult, and access to cash without strings attached. She needed a community response, not a criminal one, if any of those supports had been available. What we need from this story? Nuance, not panic. If you want to understand DMST, don't look at the scandal. Look at the circumstances. Look at the food deserts, the eviction filings, the school suspensions, the braces debt, the absence of adults who could have intervened. Look at how a child becomes a teenager and then becomes a target. If we want fewer stories like this, the answer isn't more policing. It's more stability. It's housing. It's healthcare. It's access to cash without criminalization. It's adults who show up without judgment. It's a policy that treats survival as a right, not a punishment. What you can do this weekend: Support sex worker led organizations that understand the complexity of survival economies. Advocate for policies that fund housing, food security, Medicaid, and youth support, not raids. Learn the difference between consensual adult sex work and exploitation, and insist others do too. Support grassroots groups that provide crisis care long before the state shows up with cuffs and courts. Donate to mutual aid projects that meet needs before vulnerabilities are exploited. This isn't a story about a scandal. It's a story about how exploitation happens in the gaps between what a young person needs and what a society chooses not to give. And while the powerful spin their narratives, we're over here doing what we've always done, protecting people the system never intended to protect.